And turning to a different story, the State Department fired more than 1,300 employees last Friday as part of the Trump administration's reorganization effort. The firings were met with protests outside of the administration. Former employees and diplomats say the cuts will only hurt the United States' ability to identify and counter threats from outside the country. Joining us now on this topic is Jessica Bradley Rushing. She's a former senior official with the State Department's Office of the Coordinator for Afghan Relocation Efforts. She joins us now to talk about this latest shakeup and its effects on Washington and abroad. Jessica, thank you for joining us this morning. Tell us about your story. How did you find out that you had been let go from the State Department?
Thank you for having me. So Friday morning, I actually was never expecting to receive this notification because I've been on administrative leave from the State Department since March. I took the deferred resignation that was offered earlier this year and have been on admin leave for a couple of months now. But all morning, I was getting updates from my colleagues who remain at the State Department about who was receiving the notifications and what the impacts of those were going to be. And then I just happened to check my own email and saw that I had received one as well. I think the biggest thing for me is that the office where I worked, the Office for the Coordinator for Afghan Relocation Efforts, was just completely stripped. Everyone in leadership was let go, and a skeleton staff is all that remains. There are other cuts that were made across the department that really just completely dismantle the infrastructure for Afghan relocations and got the entire program that we'd worked on for the last 3.5, almost 4 years.
I'm just mentioning this at the end of your answer there, but talk about bigger picture. What do these cuts at the State Department mean for the country, for the work that you were doing?
Well, there's just a massive loss of expertise in particularly the work that I was doing for Afghan relocations. And the dismantling of this program is abandoning Afghan allies. So we have folks who remain in the pipeline who are eligible for at least a chance at immigration to the United States because they served alongside the U.S. mission. And now there's nobody left in the State Department to really do this mission. The way that this was broken down since the beginning of the Trump administration really just abandons hundreds of thousands of allies, including some folks who had already been moved by the U.S. government to platforms in third countries where they were finishing their immigration processing, and now they're just stuck in limbo. 1,500 people are stuck in Qatar right now with no idea if there's a path forward for them and what will happen to them next.
What are you hearing from some of those Afghan allies? I know, obviously, that this has been going back and forth for months now, as you were talking about, but did you hear anything on Friday over the weekend from some of the Afghans that you had been working with?
Yeah, I've spoken to Afghans directly on the ground in Qatar, and they're just terrified. They don't know what's going to happen next. They believed in the promise that the U.S. government made to them. They trusted us to keep them safe. They followed all the rules. And for some people, those 1,500 people who are stuck in Doha, they went on a U.S. chartered plane to Doha, and they've been there since at the very least January, because everyone who is there right now has been stuck there since the beginning of this administration, and they're terrified. They have no idea what's happening next, and they're afraid that they're going to be forcibly repatriated to Afghanistan, where they could face torture and death at the hands of the Taliban.
I want you to talk a little bit more about what happens if people get sent back. You mentioned that the Taliban could come find people, but I guess it's hard to imagine what people will face if they are repatriated back to Afghanistan, especially if there are women who are part of these groups that were coming here with family and stuff like that. What does that look like in particular going back to Afghanistan for them?
Well, more than half of the people who are stuck in Qatar right now are women, and many, many, many are children as well. And for those people to be forcibly returned to Afghanistan, when the reason that they were moved in the first place was because of their association with the U.S. mission in Afghanistan, it just puts them in direct danger. We know that women are living under brutal conditions in Afghanistan right now, and they are repressed and oppressed and have very few rights. And the idea that we would send these women back into conditions that are unlivable and in which their lives will be in danger is unconscionable. And these decisions are being made at the State Department. The woman who's in charge of this, Mary Bishoping, she's actually the child of Afghan refugees herself. And she's spoken about the need to protect Afghan allies and what we need to do to protect Afghan women and children in particular. And still, this decision seems to be going forward, that we're not going to keep the promises that we made to these women, to these children, and to these allies. And we could be sending them back into certain danger and potential death.
Jessica, what is the human cost, not just in the United States, but around the world from these cuts at the State Department?
There's just a massive loss of institutional knowledge and experience in issues that should and are critical to people everywhere. Diplomacy is an important tool that we use to keep ourselves and the world a safer place. The cuts that were made, I was only at the State Department for a short time, but there were folks who were there for 20 and 30 years serving this country as civil servants and foreign service officers who just have a wealth of knowledge that can't be replaced easily. And when these cuts were made, entire offices were slashed, including my own.
You were involved in this program for years. What is next for you? How will you continue your work?
So since I've stepped down and stepped away from the State Department, I've continued doing this work with an organization called AfghanEvac. This is an organization that has been at the forefront of these operations since August of 2021 and worked closely with the U.S. government to build Enduring Welcome, which was our safest, most secure legal immigration pathway that we've ever had in the history of this country. So I'll continue to work to support Afghan allies with AfghanEvac and just sort of bear witness and speak truth about what's happening to the folks that we made a promise to.
Well, Jessica Bradley Rushing, thank you so much for joining us to talk about this important issue. Please keep us posted on your efforts going forward.
Thank you for having me.